today's show. Amazing Game Productions makes an amazingly ill-informed take. NewbieDM blames the game for not knowing how to say no. Shillbo Baggins makes an even more idiotic retort. Doig and Swift has a very novel postmodernist whine about dice and D&D. And Matt Shay maybe should give up game design until he can actually design some decent advice. Friends, grognards, channel members, lend me your BC headache powder, for you have found your way to Driving and Dragons, and this is Intelligence is a Dumpstat. I'm Daniel, and I will be your guide through some of the most idiotic hot takes in the world of our great hobby on the cesspool that is the internet. First, I would like to guide you to the like, hype, share, and subscribe buttons before depositing you safely in the comment section to share your own thoughts on these mountains of moronic meditations. You know, now that I have the 7 keys to effective design series rolling, my channel members are actually getting a decent amount of early access content. And my patrons, well, you know, they already got the full list of bonus tips from that series. So it isn't just supporting my dream of restoring and giving away a car here on the channel now. You actually get something for it. So throw a brother a buck or two and let's make one member of our hobby very happy. Anyway, on with the show. It was once said, better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. Regardless of if it was Abraham Lincoln, Mark Twain, or one of several other attributees to said this little saying, Amazing Game Productions really needs to hear it. Mark, over at AGP, is a pretty decent sort in general, but he's one of those who hides behind a goofy anime elf profile pic and posts a ton of idiotic cartoon cheesecake to get you to click on his stuff, and I find that annoying. And he fell right in line with what you'd expect from that type here. You see, a post was made about why less women are into D&D and why most female hires in the RPG world end up trying to radically change it, and old AGP just couldn't handle that. Oh, he was so worked up that he completely forgot that less and most are not synonyms for none and all, before mounting up on his white horse to charge in to defend helpless female RPG workers. Urbanski doesn't realize how many women once worked on TTRPGs alongside with the men, and there were many. But now corpos and Twitter brains who make decisions based on social media and what it tells them to think, feel, and act are running the game, all because they listened to people who have never developed a game, created a comic, or written a novel. That's what's wrong, my dude. Nothing wrong with women game devs of the past. It's the new flock of idiots who take their worldviews from social media that are running everything. Now, in a way, Mark is correct. The female devs in the past were largely not a problem, and it is driven by people pushing for the hire of people based on social views and intrinsic characteristics rather than on actual skill. Unfortunately, he's also talking to a fairly prolific game designer who's been professionally involved in TTRPGs for decades and who's probably forgotten more about early design history than AGP ever knew. So saying that the RPG pundit doesn't realize how many women worked on TTRPGs is just idiotic. And worse than that, it's a complete misrepresentation of what pundit said in an effort to play male feminist. This comment was a clear example of a knee-jerk instinct to yell, not all, at the top of your lungs, and it biting you hard in the ass, because Pundit clearly pointed out that the number of women interested in D&D naturally is much lower, which is true, and that a modern decision to DEI hire more women in order to court potential new female players has resulted in D&D being changed fundamentally into a game that is unrecognizable to its roots. And all of that is dead nuts accurate. So maybe lay off of the quadruple G AI generated elf boobs and come back to the real world for a minute. Touch grass before it's too late. NewbieDM was creating a decent amount of conversation this week, but unfortunately some of it added tremendous credibility to the first part of his name. He was asked his issues with D&D 3.5 and replied with, "It's system mastery. I don't think it's good design. It penalizes casual players." This is functionally the MMORPG modern player mindset that encompasses the entire downfall of Dungeons & Dragons as a game, right there on display. 3.5 does not penalize anything. In fact, I've played every edition of the game except for 5.5, and 3.5 is the only edition of the game where virtually every unique variation and combination of player-selected options is completely viable from level 1 to well into the epic levels. The whine about optimization and power gaming is not a flaw of the system, it's a flaw of the players and far more frequently a flaw of the game master. 3.5e penalized min-maxing naturally. At least it did when the GM made sure to include a wide variety of unique challenges and encounters. Of course it's easy to break the game when rote video game style combat is 99% of the character's mechanical function. And that is to say nothing of weak DMs allowing combinations of feats, classes, races, and abilities that in no way make any logical sense within the world, and allowing 14,000 supplements to be used, none of which actually work within the world that they've created. NewbieDM 3.5 isn't welcoming, just like a limousine isn't a luxury item when the driver spends all of his time trying to run you over. I hate to sound like a broken record, but maybe you wouldn't call a hammer drill a shitty tool if you would quit trying to use it to hang pictures. Of course, let it never be said that I play favorites or spare people who are quote-unquote on my side. Because Shillbo Baggins responded to Newbie with what a bunch of crybaby BS. "I'm victimized by resources. You don't play D&D, dude." Now, I don't know much about this person other than 90% of its X speed is financially illiterate cryptocurrency nonsense that'll see you broke as a bad joke if you follow his timing the market stupidity. But what I do know is that this comment ironically shows that he is the exact issue that leads people like NewbieDM to have a poor understanding of 3.5 as a game system. Shillbo confuses optional supplemental material with resources, as if having them entitles players to use them at will. Now, he's almost right. 3.5e is resource rich for the Dungeon Master. The players only get what resources the DM allows, unless you want the game to devolve into a bad computer game mess. But Shillbo displayed all the unearned conceit, stupidity that power gaming optimizer types brought with them to the hobby when they left EverQuest and came to Dungeons & Dragons. Now, Nerdcognito set off a landmine this week, but you know what else they did? Well, a few months back, Nerdcognito had me on to promote Corvid Codex Volume 1, which is available right now on Lulu in both premium 6x9 trade paperback and high-res ebook formats. Now, I am continuing that time-honored tradition by promoting this fantastic 168-page work of 7 short stories by 6 different authors, wrapped in amazing custom artwork right here in the middle of this video. You should get a copy and then promote it too. You won't be disappointed. So what did Nerdcognito do? Well, they called out Brendan Lee Mulligan, the current DM of Critical Role, for finally reaching the point we all knew that Critical Role would eventually reach. Critical Role is called an actual play and a live play. Amazingly, none of those words are true. They are not actually playing, and it isn't live. They pre-record and edit several sessions at a time. They follow a loose script. They alter the rules, not for verisimilitude, but to produce a product that is focused on entertaining viewers and not entertaining players. And now, they're barely even rolling dice. Yes, Brendan Lee Mulligan, the second biggest disaster in America to use the letters BLM, has announced that he has ditched using dice in Campaign 4 because the monologues were too good and he didn't want dice rolls to make them anticlimactic. Auto success because There's a section in the player's handbook that says, just make sure they always succeed if it's going to look cool. Well, the dingbats came out in force over this attack on their sacred cow. Doig and Swift, more people who pretend to be AI cartoons online yet think they should be taken seriously, came in with dice in D&D is asking the universe for impartial decisions to inject spontaneity. The mental cost of a bad roll after great RP feels like punishment, and the table now has to react to the number, not the narrative. What? Were those words supposed to come out in that order? Mental cost? For Christ's sake, this is what happens when you invest too much of your, real emotion into a game. No, Nimrod, the dice are not to inject spontaneity. They're there to provide a mechanism for resolving an abstraction that represents the countless variables that determine the results of an action. Here is a real easy shorthand that can show you just how incredibly stupid that is, that even these clowns would change their tune for. Replace the monsters, or the NPCs, with a player character. Now, I give a great monologue about how the party should give me all their gold and let me have my way with all their women before they sell themselves into slavery to fund my lifestyle. And we are talking A+++ level acting here, guys. I'm pouring it on. DM says, man, that roleplay was amazing. No rolls needed, folks. Hand over the gear, ladies get nude, and guys go get fitted for those iron collars. Tell me now about how much you need to respond to the narrative and not the numbers, you imbecile. While there are times where a particularly good idea should succeed without requiring a roll, this pea-brained idea that I want it to happen real bad so I shouldn't have to roll is just asinine. Not to be outdone, Matt Shay weighed in. Matt Shay is a game designer with a lot of ideas. Most of them very bad ideas. Like this piece of Game Master advice that ranks among the worst I've heard in a very, very long time. Don't call for a roll unless failure would be an interesting result. This is fundamentally flawed and is, like most insidiously stupid tips from the tourist hard crowd, it's a bastardization of actual good advice. If a roll should be called for, has nothing to do with how interesting failure would be. If that is what you want, stop playing games and go have round-robin story time, because that is what you actually want. The actual advice is, do not call for a roll unless failure has meaningful consequences. Interest is not a concern here, and nor is the narrative. If I'm in no hurry to pick a lock and failure just means trying again, then don't call for a roll. You will eventually get the lock picked. If it is possible to break the lock on a failure or to make noise and alert a guard, or if there's a monster coming and time is of the essence, then yeah, call for a roll, because now there's meaningful consequences. If the consequences matter, a roll is needed, period. And this applies to both meta and an in-game level. Sometimes the roll only exists to keep information hidden from the player, such as calling for a spot check even when there's nothing to be spotted, or calling for a roll to search for traps even in a room where there are none. Simply put, Shay needs to learn how games work before trying to design them. Anyway, that's about all the stupid that I can handle for this week. A new 7 Keys video is dropping in a couple of days. Members already have it. And that will be the topic of this Thursday's Driving the Conversation. I will see you guys then.